Hi, my name is Everett. Today I am reading Dark Day in the Deep Sea by Mary Pope Osborne, Magic Treehouse series, book number 39, A Merlin Mission. So let's dive right into the ocean. That's what Jack and Annie of Frog Creek, Pennsylvania know. They have to find one of the 4 secrets of happiness to help save Merlin the magician. But when the magic treehouse whisks them back off to a misty land on the middle of nowhere, they wonder how they will find anything. As the fog lifts, they see a huge 3-mast ship. Could it be a pirate ship? When a small rowboat makes its way to shore, the 3 men inside don't look like pirates at all. The ship turns out to be the world's first floating scientist laboratory, filled with sailors and scientists. Instead of hunting for treasures, the ship's crew is searching for undiscovered sea creatures and for the giant sea monster that seems to be following them. Mary Pope Osborne takes young readers on a stormy and thrilling ocean adventure packed with history, mystery, and magic. Prologue. One summer day in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, a mysterious treehouse appeared in the woods. A brother and a sister named Jack and Annie soon learned that the treehouse was magic. It could take them to any time and place in history. They also learned that the treehouse belonged to Morgan Le Fay, a magic librarian from the legendary realm of Camelot. After Jack and Annie traveled on many adventures for Merlin, the magician began sending them on Merlin missions in the treehouse. With help from 2 young sorcerers named Teddy and Kathleen, Jack and Annie visited 4 mythical places and found valuable objects to help save Camelot. On their next 4 missions, Jack and Annie once again traveled in real places in history: Venice, Baghdad, Paris, and New York. After proving to Merlin that they knew how to use magic wisely, awarded them the Wand of the Anthus, a powerful magic wand that would help them make their own magic. On the last 2 adventures, Teddy and Kathleen told Jack and Annie that Merlin was unhappy and not well, and that Morgan wanted them to search for 4 objects of happiness to share with Merlin. Now Jack and Annie are waiting for the treehouse to return and take them on the 3rd mission to help Merlin. Chapter 1, Back to the Sea. Jack felt raindrops. He looked up and saw a summer storm cloud. "Hurry," he called to Annie. They were riding their bikes home from the library. Jack's pack was filled with library books. He didn't want them to get wet. As Jack and Annie pedaled faster, a large white bird swooped over them and flew into the Frog Creek woods. "Did you see that?" cried Jack. "A seagull," called Annie. "It's a sign." "You're right," said Jack. The last time they'd seen a seagull in Frog Creek, the magic treehouse was waiting for them. "The woods," said Annie. Jack and Annie bumped their bikes over the curb. The rain fell harder as they headed into the woods. Their bikes bounced over the rough woods, crushing leaves and snapping twigs. "It must be time to look for another secret of happiness for Merlin," Jack called. "I hope Merlin's feeling better," Annie shouted. "I hope Teddy and Kathleen came with the treehouse," shouted Jack. "Me too," shouted Annie. Jack and Annie steered their bikes under the canopies of wet leaves. By the time they came to the tallest oak in the woods, the seagulls had disappeared behind the magic treehouse. Was back. It was high in the tallest oak. Its rope ladder swayed in the rain. Jack and Annie climbed off their bikes and dropped them against the trunk of the tree. "Teddy, Kathleen," Annie shouted. No one answered. "I guess they didn't come this time," said Jack. "Darn," said Annie. "I really wish we could see them." Boom! Two old kids looked down out of the treehouse window. A curly-haired boy with a big grin and a girl with sea blue eyes and a beautiful smile. Both were wearing long green cloaks. "Yay!" cried Annie. The rain fell harder as they started up the rope ladder. When they climbed into the trails, they yanked off their bike helmets and threw their arms around Teddy and Kathleen. "Morgan sends us to tell you about your next Merlin mission," said Teddy. "How is Merlin?" said Annie. Teddy stopped smiling. He shook his head. "Merlin still suffers from unspoken sorrows," Kathleen said sadly. "When can we see him?" asked Annie. "When you have learned 2 secrets of happiness to share with him." "When you have learned 2 more secrets of happiness to share with him," said Jack. "You may visit him after you have learned 2 more secrets," said Kathleen. "Morgan believes 4 is the magic number that will ensure him. We have come to send you on your search for a 3rd secret," said Teddy. Kathleen took a book from under her cloak and handed it to Jack and Annie. "From Morgan's hands to our hands to your hands," she said. Jack took the book from her. The cover showed the waves crashing on the beach. The deep sea. "Wow," said Jack. "We're going to the ocean?" "Yes," said Teddy. "That is where you will search for the next secret of happiness." "The ocean always makes me happy," said Annie. "Once Jack and I traveled to a coral reef and swam with dolphins, and we ran into an octopus, and he was nice and shy and—" "But the shark wasn't shy," Jack broke in. "He was a big hammerhead." "Oh my," said Kathleen. "We took a ride on a mini sub," said Annie. "It was so cool until it started to leak," said Jack. "And we had to escape," said Annie. "Yeah," said Jack. "We tried not to splash so the shark wouldn't notice us. We had so much fun," said Annie. Kathleen smiled. "Well, I hope you will not find the same fun on this journey," she said. "But in case you do, you have the wand of Dianthus, do you not?" asked Teddy. "The wand of Dianthus?" "Of course," said Jack. "I always carry it just in case." Jack reached into his bag and pulled out the silvery wand. It was shaped like the spiraled horn of a unicorn. "You remember the 3 rules?" asked Kathleen. "Sure," said Jack. "To make the magic, we use a wish with 5 words. And before we use the wand, we have to try our hardest," said Annie. And the wand can only be used for the good of others," said Jack. "Not just ourselves." "Exactly," said Teddy. "I wonder who the others will be on this mission," said Annie. She looked at Teddy and Kathleen. "Maybe you guys?" "I fear not," said Kathleen. "You must find the 3rd secret on your own. Just remember to keep your wits about you," said Teddy. "And listen to your hearts," said Kathleen. "Okay," said Annie. "We'll tell you all about it when we see you again." Lightning flashed through the woods as Jack pointed to the cover of the book. "I wish we could go there," he said. Thunder cracked in the dark sky. The wind blew harder. The trio started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. Piracy? Jack opened his eyes. Teddy and Kathleen were gone. The warm air was filled with mist. Jack and Annie peered out the window together. The treehouse had landed in a tall tree with spreading branches. The mist was so thick that they couldn't see around them. But Jack heard the caws of seagulls and swooshing of rolling waves. He smelled salt water and seaweed. "The ocean's out there. Feel it?" said Annie. "I can hear it and smell it," said Jack. "Then let's go play in it," said Annie. She pulled off her sneakers. "We can't just play. We have to look for the secret of happiness." "Well, I'm happiest when I'm playing in the ocean." Annie started down the rope ladder. "I'm sure our mission's harder than that," Jack thought. He took their library books out of his pack. He replaced them with the deep sea book. Hurry, said Annie. Jack put on his pack and started down after her. He stepped off the ladder and onto a misty ground. Come on, said Annie. Jack followed Annie toward the sounds of seabirds and waves. He walked through feathery ferns and climbed sloping sand dunes. When they rounded the top, Jack saw rolling waves into a wide sandy beach, but the ocean itself was surrounded by the gray haze. Wow, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Come on, let's go in, said Annie. Jack and Annie hurried down the dune and ran toward the ocean. While Annie waded into the water, Jack stood at the edge and pulled out the research book. Listen to this, Annie, he called. He read loudly. Water covers 3/4 of our Earth. Most of the ocean is an enormous plain, a little more than 2 miles deep, but some ocean trenches are more than 6 miles deep. 6 miles? Annie asked, splashing her hands in the water. It's 6 miles from Aunt Libby's to our house. I know, said Jack. He read more. The ocean is home to thousands of sea creatures. Mountains and volcanoes are also hidden deep beneath the surface of the sea. Mountains and volcanoes? Asked Annie. Under the water? That's what the book says, said Jack. The ocean's a whole world we don't know anything about. Well, some people know about it, said Annie, or this book couldn't have been written. Good point, thought Jack. Put the book away and come in, Jack, said Annie. The sun's coming out. Jack looked up from the book. The sun was burning away the mist, making the day hotter. Let's go swimming, said Annie. As Annie dove into the sea, Jack put his book into his backpack and he left his pack on the beach. Then he waded into the water. Great, huh? Called Annie. Yeah, said Jack as he dug his toes into the soft, gooey sand. Cool sea water lapped around his calves, and he felt the warm sunshine on his face. Let's swim farther out, said Annie. Maybe the secret of happiness is in the deep. How do we go down there without a submarine? Asked Jack. The wand, said Annie. Maybe it will turn us into fish or something. Jack closed his eyes and pictured the darkness of the deep filled with thousands of weird creatures. But the wand can only be used after we've tried our hardest. I don't think we've tried anything yet. Oh, right, said Annie. Plus, it has to be for the good of others. So first we have to find some others, said Jack, his eyes still closed. Jack, you won't believe it, said Annie. What? Asked Jack dreamily. Take a look, said Annie. Jack sighed and opened his eyes. The mist had cleared a bit, and the day was becoming bright and hot. I think we just found the others, said Annie. She pointed out to sea. Jack shaded his eyes and squinted through the wavy sunlight. He saw a large wooden ship with 3 tall masts. Whoa, he breathed. That's a ship from long ago. Yeah, remember when we ran into the pirate ship? This ship looks the same, doesn't it? Oh, no, said Jack. Pirates again. Look, a rowboat's leaving the ship, said Annie. Oh, man, said Jack. It's heading toward us, said Annie. Just like the other time. Remember the pirates came ashore? Remember Pinky, Stinky, and Captain Bones? Don't panic, said Jack, panicking. He splashed out of the water and ran up on the beach. Where should we go? Asked Annie, hurrying after him. To the treehouse, said Jack. He grabbed his backpack. But the pirates climbed up to the treehouse, said Annie. Pinky and Stinky found. Forget Pinky and Stinky, said Jack. Let's just get out of here. Jack and Annie charged toward the sand dune. They raced over the top and ran through the tall ferns and grass until they came to the rope ladder. Up, up, cried Jack. Jack and Annie climbed up the rope ladder, pulling the rope ladder up after them. "Where's the Pennsylvania book?" said Jack. He looked around wildly for the book that always took them home. He grabbed it and found the picture of Frog Creek. Wait, don't make a wish yet," said Annie. She was looking out the window. "I'm not sure these guys are pirates." Clutching the Pennsylvania book to his chest, Jack looked out of the window with Annie. There were 3 men in a rowboat. The boat rode the top of the wave and came close to the beach. Two of the men scrambled out and dragged the boat from the shallow water onto the sand. They both wore huge, bulky vests over white, puffy sleeves shirts. They wore round white hats and white pants rolled up to their knees. "Those don't look like Pinky or Stinky," said Annie. "You're right," said Jack. "Pirates never wear so clean clothes." "And look at the third guy," said Annie. The third man stepped out of the rowboat, carrying a butterfly net. He pulled off his bulky vest, revealing an old-fashioned suit with a bow tie. "He definitely doesn't look like a pirate," said Annie. "Yeah," said Jack. "He looks like he'd never been on the boat before." As the 2 sailors pulled the rowboat farther onto the beach, the man in the tie picked up a stick. He started poking at clumps of seaweed. "What's he doing?" asked Jack. The man dropped his stick and picked up something small from the sand. He studied it for a moment, then he knelt down and pulled a small book from his pocket. He started to write. "What's he doing?" said Jack. "I don't know," said Annie. "But one thing's for sure, pirates never carry butterfly nets or write in notebooks." "You're right," said Jack. He put down the Pennsylvania book. "So, what's going on?" "Let's go find out," said Annie. She dropped the rope ladder back down onto the ground. Jack grabbed his pack and hurried after her. Together they ran barefoot over the hot sand and through the ferns. They climbed to the top of the sand dune and looked down. The 3 men were still at the edge of the water while the big ship drifted offshore. "Hey, look, you can see the name of the ship," said Annie. Jack peered through the haze and read on the side of the ship, "HMS Challenger." I'll look it up," he whispered. He pulled out the research book and found the insertion index. "It's here," he whispered. He found a page and read, "The HMS Challenger, HMS stands for Her Majesty's ship, was a British Navy vessel that served as the first delegated scientific exploration ship in the history of the world." "Oh man," said Jack, looking up. "That is so cool." "Yeah, read more," whispered Annie. Jack read on. From 1872 to 1876, the HMS Challenger circled the globe, exploring the dark depths of the ocean. There were over 200 seamen and 6 scientists on board. "So we landed in the 1870s, said Jack, looking up again. "And that guy with the butterfly net must be one of the scientists," said Annie. "Come on, let's go meet him." Before Jack could tell her to wait, Annie darted down the sand dune. "Hi, guys," she called, waving her arms. "Hi!" The 3 men whirled around. Their eyes grew wide and their mouths dropped open. They looked at Annie as if they were staring at ghosts. Chapter 3. A Creature Named Henry. Jack threw their book into his pack and quickly followed Annie. "Hi," he said to the 3 men. "Don't be afraid," said Annie. "We come in peace." The 3 men kept gawking. Who are you?" one of the sailors sputtered. Jack and Annie walked closer. "I'm Jack and this is Annie," said Jack. The man in the bow tie stepped forward. He had a long mustache and a big friendly smile. "My name is Henry," he said. "I came ashore to look for rare butterflies, plants, and shells, but it seems I found a rare creature called a Jack and Annie." "And we found a creature called Henry," said Annie, giggling. "That's what we named a pterodon when we went to the time of the dinosaurs." I beg your pardon, said Henry. She's teasing, said Jack. What an unusual wit, said Henry. His eyes sparkled. Well, you have not only found a Henry, you've also found a Joe and a Tommy, the two able seamen who rowed me here. Hi, Joe and Tommy, said Danny. She gave the two sailors a big smile, but Joe and Tommy did not smile back. They were both scowling. Where are you from? Joe asked suspiciously. Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, said Annie. Where's that? Asked Tommy. America, said Jack. How nice, said Henry. Why are you here? We're on vacation, said Annie. We're camped with our family back there somewhere. She waved vaguely. Vacation, said Henry. Our parents like to vacation in really out-of-the-way places, said Annie. Henry chuckled. Americans! Are you a scientist from the HMS Challenger, said Jack. He was eager to change the subject. Why, yes, said Henry. I'm one of the team trying to solve the riddles of the deep. Jack loved the sound of that. Riddles of the deep. What kind of riddles have you solved so far? He asked. Well, for one thing, we have learned that the ocean floor is absolutely teeming with life, said Henry. You didn't already know that? Asked Annie. We thought it was probably the case, said Henry, but mind you, many people cannot imagine that life can exist in the icy darkness of the deep. In fact, some still believe there are no floor to the ocean at all. They think the sea goes on down forever. Are you serious, said Annie? I guess you'll be letting them know that most of the ocean is not more than 2 miles deep. Of course, some ocean trenches are more than 6 miles deep. But, Annie, said Jack. My, you know a lot about the sea, said Henry, looking at Annie with curiosity. Well, I know that mountain ranges and volcanoes are down there, too, said Annie. Jack leaned in closely to Annie. Stop showing off, he said under his breath. I mean, maybe, just maybe, said Annie to Henry. Of course, I'm just guessing. Well, you are a very good guesser, said Henry. On our voyage, we've collected many volcanic rocks from the deep. Cool, said Annie. How'd you get them? Mini subs? Mini subs? Asked Henry. You know, they carry you down to the deep, said Annie. Annie, Jack said between his teeth. He gave her a little shake of his head. Just stop. Jack was pretty sure mini-subs hadn't been invented by the early 1870s. He quickly changed the subject again. And you study butterflies too, he said, pointing to Henry's net. And seashells? Indeed I do, said Henry. In fact, I just came ashore to look for a rare shell just now, and I think I may have found its cousin. He opened his book to a page that showed a pencil drawing of the shell. Would you like us to help you find more? Asked Annie. Why, thank you, said Henry, but I have quite successfully found what I came for. Well, we'll be going back to the ship now. Oh, please, can we visit the HMS Challenger? Annie blurted out. Out of the question, said the sailor named Joe. Well, said Henry. Sure, the captain would never approve of bringing children on board, Tommy broke in. It's absolutely against the rules. Henry looked at Jack and Annie. Jack didn't want to break the rules, but at the same time, he really wanted to visit the ship. We really want to learn about sea exploration, he said. He gave the scientist a hopeful smile. We promise we won't get in the way, said Annie, and our parents like us to learn new things. Henry turned back to the two seamen. Surely such bright and curious young people should be allowed to visit our ship, he said. Since we'll be drifting and dreading in this area all day, we can return them to shore before nightfall. Joe and Tommy frowned at each other, but finally Joe gave a quick nod. Yay, said Annie. Thanks, said Jack. We promise we won't cause any trouble. See that? You don't, said Henry with a smile. Joe and Tommy, would you mind lending your two vests? Never fit 'em, said Joe. Well, we must do what we can to keep them safe, said Henry. The two seamen grudgingly handed Jack and Annie their bulky vests. So these are old-fashioned life preservers, thought Jack. The vests were made of blocks of cork tied together. Even though Jack buckled it tightly, it hung low on his body, almost slipping off. I'm afraid they are rather too big, said Henry, but still they might save you from a capsize. Don't worry, said Annie. We're really good swimmers. We should go now, sir, Joe said impatiently. Yes, said Henry. Let us be off. Joe and Tommy pushed the rowboat into the shallow water, and while Jack and Annie had been talking with Henry, the water had turned choppy. Dark gray clouds had rolled in, hiding the sun. Climb on after me, Henry told Jack and Annie, and they followed him into the rowboat. Jack's backpack wouldn't fit over his jacket, so he clutched his pack against his chest as Joe and Tommy pushed the boat farther out into the ocean. The sailors jumped in and picked up their oars and began rowing back to the ship. Chapter 4, Off the Ship. The wind's against us, said Joe as he and Tommy rowed. Even after the boat moved past the breakers, it kept bouncing up and down on the swells of the waves. Water splashed over the sides, soaking Jack's clothes, but he wasn't worried about the wind or water. He was worrying about being seasick because waves and nausea had started to come over him. Sorry, it's a bit tough going, said Henry. We can take it, said Annie. We hope, thought Jack. The last thing he wanted to do was throw up, especially in front of Joe and Tommy. We should get back just in time to see the men haul up the morning's catch, said Henry. This is so much fun, said Annie, her eyes shining as the little rowboat bobbed up and down. Jack wasn't having fun at all. To keep from being sick, he gripped his pack and closed his eyes and gritted his teeth. Every day we make new discoveries, said Henry. Off the coast of Argentina, we found over 100 new species, giant worms several feet long, shrimp the size of lobsters. Caught them in our nets, didn't we, Joe? Hey, said Joe as he pulled on the oars. But the creature that's never been caught is the one that these mates should be worried about. What creature is it? Asked Annie. The great monster, answered Tommy. Jack opened his eyes. What, you mean like a shark? No, he asked. No, lad. 'Tis much worse than any shark. Even the 20-foot tiger shark that's been following us, said Tommy. The sailor blinked very nervously. Whoa, 20-foot tiger shark, thought Jack. He looked at the dark water for a shark fin. Hey, the monster is much bigger than any shark, said Joe. They say it looks like a cross between a dragon and a gigantic starfish. No, more like a floating nest of snakes, mate, said Tommy with a shudder. They say it'll curl you around your body and strangle you to death. A floating nest of snakes, said Annie. Jack gulped. He turned to Henry. Have you ever seen the monster? He asked the scientist. Henry shook his head. I've never seen it, he said, but a few of our crewmen claim to have glimpsed something mysterious in these waters just yesterday. Don't be scared, mate, said Joe. If we see a monster, we'll hurl our harpoons at him. We'll shoot him with our cannons, said Tommy. He and Joe laughed loudly. Maybe the sailors on the ship are just trying to scare the scientists, Jack thought hopefully. Why else would they be laughing? When they reached the HMS Challenger, the rowboat grew alongside the ship. Rocking on the water, Jack gripped his backpack tighter as more waves of seasickness washed over him. You go first, mate, Joe said to Jack. You're looking a bit green. Jack clutched his pack under one arm. Jack gripped the sides of the ladder and held on tightly, and he climbed up from the wooden hull of the ship up to the deck. Annie came after him, then Henry, then Joe, then Tommy. When they were all safely on the deck, the two seamen hauled up the rowboat. Jack took a deep breath. Though the large ship rocked on the wind, it wasn't nearly as bad as the small rowboat's movement on the waves. Looking around the deck, Jack saw teams of sailors working. Some were coiling thick ropes, others were hauling up strange-looking buckets. Jack turned to ask Henry what the sailors were doing, but Henry was staring at a tall man in a white uniform and a heavy-set older man in a dark suit that were walking briskly toward them. The two men were frowning. "Oh, no," murmured Henry. "Prepare to meet thy doom." "Who are they?" asked Danny. Before Henry could answer, the man in the white coat shouted, "What have you done this time, Henry, Mr. Mosley?" Jack moved closer to Danny. He clutched his pack on his life vest. "Well, Captain," started Henry. "Goodness, what have you brought up from the sea now, Henry?" the portly man asked. "A four-legged, four-armed creature from the deep?" "Yes, Professor. It's a jack-dandy from America," said Henry. "I found these creatures vacationing on the island." The portly man smiled. "Oh, I see. I thought perhaps it was the monster that was sighted by some of the men yesterday." "The monster again," thought Jack. "This ship is not a place for children, Mr. Mosley," the captain said gruffly. "Yes, I know, sir," said Henry, "but these two children are extraordinary. They hardly seem like children at all. They're quite independent and have great knowledge of the sea. I thought it might be permissionable to bring them aboard for the afternoon and then return them to the shore." "I'm afraid it goes against all the ship's rules," said the captain. "It's not Henry's fault, Captain," and he piped up. "We begged him to let us visit your ship." "Ah, did you now?" the portly man asked. His eyes twinkled. "Why is that?" "We love the ocean," said Annie, "and we really like to learn about the sea exploration, sir," said Jack. Well, you've come to the right place," said the man. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Professor Thompson, the scientist director of the Challenger. The professor is one of the world's most renowned experts of the ocean," said Henry. "Wow," said Annie. "Well, I don't know about that," said the professor modestly, but he put his thumbs in his vest and began speaking as if he were giving a lecture. "Since the beginning of the time, secrets of the deep have been hidden from us, but now with the explanation, we have learned many things like that." "Like what?" asked Jack. "We have used miles and miles of steel wire to measure the depths of the ocean," said the professor. "We have lowered thermometers to measure the temperatures in the deep. But perhaps the most important of all, we have learned about the amazing creatures who live in the dark regions far beneath the ocean waves." "That is all good," said Professor, but the captain broke in. "But I want these children off the ship immediately, before the weather gets worse. Do you hear that, Mr. Mosley? Off the ship." Chapter 5, Ooze. The captain turned and strode away. "Sorry, friends," Henry said to Jack and Annie, "but the captain's in charge." He looked around. "I see Joe and Tommy are helping the men bring up the catch now. As soon as they are free, I will ask them to take you back to the shore." "I am very sorry." "That's okay," said Annie. "You did what you could. Before you young people leave, perhaps you would like to see today's specimens?" asked the professor. "Sure," said Jack and Annie together. Then come along," said the professor. "Every single day we make new discoveries." Hurrying with Annie across the deck, Jack couldn't wait to see what had just been brought up from the sea. They followed Henry and the professor to a team of sailors pulling up large nets. The nets were shaped like giant bags with mops attached to the bottoms. "What are those mops for?" asked Annie. "They sweep up sea animals from the floor of the ocean," explained Henry. "We pull them from pitch darkness into the day of light," said the professor. "That must scare them," said Annie. But the professor didn't seem to hear her. "Over the years, we have hauled up tens of thousands of specimens," he said. As the sailors dumped the bags onto the deck, Jack saw mostly mud, but lying in the mud were tiny, squirmy pink and yellow fish and fiery orange sea stars. "No monsters there, huh?" asked Annie. The professor looked at her. "Not today, my dear," he said. I was just kidding, said Annie. Do you believe in monsters? Oh, well, the professor looked serious. The sea is very deep, my dear. It covers nearly 3/4 of this earth. So I say to myself, might it not indeed hold many mysterious creatures, including monsters? Good point, thought Jack. But don't be afraid, said the professor. Someday we will catch all those monsters and study them. We will conquer our fears through knowledge. Won't we, Henry? Yes, sir, said Henry. Conquer our fears through knowledge, said the professor, repeating his thought with enthusiasm. I shall add that to my lecture. Low thunder rolled in the sky. Jack looked up. Black clouds hovered over the head. A strong gust of wind swept over the deck. Attention, the captain shouted, heading toward them. A squall is headed our way. For now, take the children below to the main deck. Yes, sir, said Henry. He smiled at Jack and Annie. Well, my friends, I suppose you get to stay with us a little while longer after all. Yay, Annie said softly. Only those on watch stay on board, the captain shouted to his crew. Everyone else get below. Henry led Jack and Annie away from just as the rain began to pour down. Water dripped from Jack's hair and backpack and life vest, and he and Annie followed Henry down a steep flight of stairs and to a dimly lit hallway. Our ship was converted from a war vessel to a ship of sea laboratory, said Henry. The Navy removed 16 of the 18 guns on board to make room for them. Would you like to see mine? Oh, yes, said Jack. He couldn't wait to see what had actually sea laboratory. Follow me. Henry unlocked the door and showed Jack and Annie into a large, dim room. There was a small skylight overhead. Rain pounded against the glass. Henry struck a match and lit a couple of oil lamps. Shadows danced around the room. Jack smiled and let out his deep sigh. He loved the sea lab. Shelves were lined with hundreds of different sized bottles. The bottles were filled with floating blobs. In the middle of the room was a wooden table. It held maps, rulers, thermometers, bowls with goo-looking stuff, and a big microscope. Henry pointed to the microscope. Would you like to see something remarkable? He asked. Oh, yes, said Annie. She peered through the eyepiece. Whoa, that's amazing, she breathed. Let me see, said Jack. He put his pack down on the table and looked in the microscope. He saw the tiny skeleton of a seahorse. Cool, he said. The seahorse is no bigger than a grain of sugar, said Henry. Of course, I'm fascinated by large creatures as well. Why, just yesterday I spent several hours studying a near bone of a dolphin and a tooth of a shark. And what's in those bottles? Asked Annie. She pointed to the rows and rows of bottles on Henry's shelves. Many curiosities, said the scientist. That large one, for instance, holds a creature that looks like a giant stock. Some call it a blubberfish, but it's not a fish at all. It is made up of millions of tiny sea creatures. Ew, said Annie. And there's a rare sea slug, said Henry. He pointed to a bright yellow blob floating in a clear liquid. Nice color, said Jack. We study whatever we bring up from the deep, said Henry. We measure the specimens and identify them. Then we preserve them in bottles of lac coal and label of bottles. So all those bottles are filled with dead sea creatures, said Annie. No, many bottles are simply hold with ooze from the bottom of the sea, said Henry. Ooze, said Jack. The official name for mud, said Henry, smiling. Here, feel it. Henry picked up one of the plates on the table and held it out to Jack and Annie. They rubbed their sticky wet mud between their fingers. Ooze is a good name for it, said Jack. Henry gave them a cloth to wipe their hands on. Then he picked up a large book from the table, and there is the notebook where I transfer my drawing and natural history specimens, he said. He opened the book. Inside were beautiful watercolors of shells, plants, and butterflies. These are great, said Jack. Henry's notebook reminded him of the notebook he'd seen in Leonardo da Vinci's studio. This is beautiful, said Annie. She reached across Henry's table and picked up a gleaming round seashell. The shell was white with curved reddish-brown lines. Yes, Henry said softly, my Nautilus shell. Is this one of your specimens? Asked Annie. No, said Henry. I don't consider this a specimen. It's more like of a treasure. I'm afraid I grew quite fond when the little creature who once lived inside the shell died. What did he do? Asked Annie. Oh, he swam around a small tub I had for him, said Henry. He moved backwards. Rather funny. He filled himself with water and squirted it out at me, all over me. Henry smiled. I was quite sad when he died. I wished I had returned him to the sea. Henry put the shell down and let out a quiet sigh. Silly to think that way, I know. Not silly at all, said Annie. The ship's bell rang. Time to go, said Henry. The captain runs a tight ship. It's against the rules to be late, so let us be off to the wardroom. The wardroom? Asked Jack. That's where the scientists and naval officers eat, said Henry. Eat, said Jack weakly. The thought of food made him feel queasier. Yes, said Henry. He blew out the 2 oil lamps. Come along. You must join us. It's lunchtime. Chapter 6, Pea Soup. Henry led Jack and Annie out of the sea lab, locking the door behind him. Then he led them away through the hall and down another flight of steep steps. In the faint light of the lower deck, Jack saw naval officers and scientists streaming. Jack saw through a door overhead. He, Annie, and Henry lined up behind them and filed into a wardroom. Still wearing their bulky life vests, Jack and Annie sat awkwardly on a long bench in front of the table. Many of the men stared at them with curiosity. The professor smiled, but the captain did not look happy. I thought our friends might join us for lunch, Henry said to the captain. I promise they will return to the shore after the storm. Very well, said the captain, immediately after the storm. Aye, sir, said Henry. He turned to the other officers at the table. Gentlemen, may I introduce Jack and Annie from America? They have an adventurous travelers. Hi, murmured Jack and Annie. The officers and scientists nodded politely. Sailors in white uniforms acted as waiters. What are we having for lunch? Annie whispered to Henry. The usual, said Henry, sighing. Salt, meat, pickles, dried biscuits. This is not good, thought Jack. He was right. When he was served, he could hardly look at his food, much less eat it. He was thirsty, though. He reached for his cup and took a long sip of water. Jack immediately spit the liquid back into his cup. It was unbelievably sour. He gagged and coughed. When he looked up, everyone was staring at him, including the captain. Excuse me, said Jack, wiping his mouth. His face felt hot from embarrassment. You just guzzled your lime juice, said the professor. Most of us take as small sips. Lime juice? Asked Annie. Why? And prevents scurvy, and said the professor. Every day we drink a cup of lime juice for vitamin C. Otherwise, we get sores or rotten teeth. Yuck, said Annie. Henry smiled. You won't get scurvy if you eat fruits and vegetables, he said. But it is hard to keep vegetables and fruits fresh on board of a ship. Jack couldn't think about eating or drinking anything at the moment. All of it, especially the pickles, made him feel even queasier. Then the roll of the ship didn't help either. The waves seem to be getting worse, he said to Henry. They do indeed, said Henry. He turned and looked out a small round window. Can't see a thing. It's as thick as pea soup out there. Oh no, Jack groaned to himself. Please don't talk about pea soup. The ship lurched, cups and plates slid off across the table and crashed to the floor. Annie grabbed Jack as the ship rocked wildly. Steady as she goes, said the captain. It seems the storm is fully upon us, said the professor. The ship lurched again. More cups and plates slid off the table. Jack and Annie almost slid off their chairs, but without any sign of nervous men, the officers and scientists stood up and hurried out of the room as if they knew just what to do in bad weather. I'll take you down to the hold, said Henry to Jack and Annie. We'll wait until the waves calm down. The ship pitched violently as they stood up from the table, holding on to the back of the life vest. Henry steered Jack and Annie out of the wardroom. Jack nearly slipped on the wet floor. His bare feet crushed some soggy biscuits and pickles. He tried not to think about it. Or out in the dark hall, the wind howled out the stairwell from the deck, spraying all of them with ocean foam. I must go secure my lab, Henry shouted to Jack and Annie. He pointed to the stairs. Go down one more flight. I'll join you when I can. We'll come with you, said Annie. 'Tis better to be safe. Follow the others quickly. I'll come soon. Henry unlocked the door to his lab and disappeared inside. Come on, let's go down, said Jack. He grabbed Annie's hand and pulled her down toward the stairwell. Officers and sailors were all heading down the steps ahead of them. Just as Jack and Annie started down, the ship lurched. Jack's stomach lurched with it. He covered his mouth. I'm definitely going to be sick, he thought. He really didn't want to throw up in front of the sailors or in front of the captain and the others. You go down. I'll be right there, Jack shouted at Annie. Why, where are you going? Annie yelled. Just go down, said Jack. Then he whirled around and charged up 2 flights of steps. On the top deck, Jack went onto the deck. The rain pounded, the wind was howling. The waves looked like dark mountains. Sea foam was blowing everywhere. Jack knew at once he made a mistake. Better to be embarrassed than drown, he thought. Just as he turned back to the steps, Annie burst out onto the deck. Jack, she cried, what are you doing? Jack forgot about throwing up. I made a mistake, he shouted. We shouldn't be up here. Go down. I'm coming with you. We have to go back down. He pushed Annie toward the stairwell. A giant wave crashed over the sides of the ship. Jack fell and slid across the foam-covered deck. It was impossible to see anything. The wind was screaming. Jack tried to stand up, but wearing his clumsy life vest, he couldn't. He couldn't get back on his feet. Jack finally held himself up. But just as he did, another giant wave broke over the side of the ship. The ship rolled again. Jack fell on his knees. Another wave crashed on him. Jack was swept up by the foamy water and tossed overboard into the churning sea. Chapter 7. Help! Jack plunged down into the sea. The water was freezing cold. He bobbed back up to the surface, choking and coughing. The life vest kept Jack afloat, but the waves kept hammering down. Help! Jack shouted. Thoughts of the 20-foot tiger shark and the mysterious monster shot through his mind. Help! Help! He screamed. Jack heard someone else screaming. Help! It was Annie. She'd been washed off the ship too. Jack flailed his arms and kicking his legs, trying to get to Annie. A wave lifted him up and tossed him toward her. But just as Jack reached out his hand to her, another wave pushed her past him, out of reach. The wand, Jack! Annie shouted. Use the wand! The wand, thought Jack. The wand of Dianthus. Where was it? In his backpack. He didn't have his backpack. Where was his back? Jack, the wand, Annie yelled. I don't have it, Jack shouted. His voice was lost in the roar of the storm. Jack kept flailing and kicking, trying to get to Annie. Jack kept his cork life vest coming loose. Another wave crashed over him and one side of the vest slipped off his arm. Jack clutched the vest, trying to keep it on, but the waters kept pulling and tugging. The sea itself seemed like a monster. As Jack desperately fought the water, he saw another life vest floating free on the waves. It was Annie's. Where was she? Jack! Annie! Jack screamed. As he looked around, he lost the fight of the sea. A wave washed the vest right off of him. Then another wave crashed down on him and pushed him underwater. Jack held his breath and plunged through the black water. He thrashed his arms and kicked his legs, trying to get to the surface. His head popped above the water, and he took one deep gulp of air before another wave washed him under, and he went under again. Jack kept kicking and flailing, trying to swim, but the fight was too great to the surface. Just when he was about to run out of air, he felt something curl around his waist. Then he felt something being lifted toward the surface. Jack's head popped above the water. He opened his mouth and gasped for air. The waves were swirling and foamy, but Jack kept his head above. Something around his waist was holding him up. Jack couldn't think at first. He was trying too hard to breathe, but then he saw something spreading across the water near him. It was the giant gray umbrella with dark spots all over it. Rising from the center of the umbrella was a huge round head. It had yellow eyes with black pupils. Stretching out from the umbrella was tentacles, lots of tentacles, all connected by a thick web with double rows of suckers on each one. A giant octopus, Jack thought with horror. It was much bigger than the octopus they'd seen a long time ago, and this time a tentacle was round of the huge creature was curling around his waist. Help! Jack shrieked. He tried to pull himself free from the thick rubbery arm. The giant octopus held him tight. Jack looked around wildly. Where was Annie? Jack! Annie shouted. Jack saw her. One of the octopus tentacles was lifting Annie above the surface of the water. Too. Jack was relieved to see Annie was matched by his terror. We're caught, he cried. Try to escape. Jack kept trying to break free from the huge tentacle, but the more he fought, the tighter the grip came of the octopus. Don't fight him, Jack, Annie yelled. He's helping us. Jack couldn't think straight. Was she crazy? He'll strangle us to death and pull us back underwater, he shouted. We have to fight him. No, shouted Annie. You're wrong. Can't you see he's saving us from drowning? Is he? Thought Jack. He tried to not panic. The octopus arm around his middle felt firm, but he couldn't tell that it wasn't trying to strangle him. It actually felt like it was hugging him, circling him like an inner tube, holding him above the water. Jack saw the creature's huge yellow eyes fixed on him. As Jack stared back into his eyes, he knew what Annie was saying was true. The creature wasn't trying to hurt him. Instead, the octopus looked certain. He looked curious, too, and even a little shy. Staring back at the eyes of the octopus, Jack found himself smiling. As he and Annie kept bobbing up and down in the arm of the octopus, all of Jack's fears vanished. This was the weirdest rescue he'd ever experienced. Hi, you, Annie said to the octopus. We come in peace. Jack felt so dazed he started laughing, and Annie laughed too. Even the octopus looked amused. Their laughter was interrupted by the blare of the horn. Jack heard the men shrieking and shouting. He looked up and saw the HMS Challenger heading straight toward them. Chapter 8, Monster of the Deep. Sailors were on the top deck. They were yelling and pointing at the giant octopus. The giant octopus loosened its hold on Jack and Annie. The ship, Jack gurgled before slipping under the water. His head popped back up. Swim to the ship, Annie shouted. He shouted to Annie. Jack and Annie started swimming. The sky was still dark with clouds and the sea was still rough, but arm over arm they swam until they got close to the ladder on the side of the ship. "Ahoy!" someone shouted from above. Jack and Annie looked up and saw Henry and the professor standing on top of the ladder. "Climb up!" yelled Henry. "Hurry, children, hurry!" cried the professor. "Before it comes back." Jack swam as fast as he could to the ladder. He and Annie got there at the same time. They pulled themselves onto the ladder and climbed. When they reached the top, Henry and the professor held them onto the deck. Henry wrapped wool blankets around them. "Thank goodness you guys are saved," said the professor. "I thought you were below in the hold," said Henry. "How did you end up in the water?" "The storm, the waves," gasped Jack. "The waves threw us overboard," said Annie. "Why were you on the top deck?" asked Henry. I was seasick," said Jack. "I followed Jack and a big wave came crashing down on us into the water," said Annie. "Our life vests saved us at first," said Jack, "but then they came off. Then the octopus saved us," said Annie. "The monster saved you?" said the professor. No, not the monster," said Jack. "A giant octopus." "Yes, the monster of the deep. I do not think it saved you, boy," said the professor. "It is a miracle that it did not eat you and your sister alive." No, he's not a monster. He didn't try to do any of that," said Jack. "He did save us," said Annie. "He held us above the water." Really, said Jack. "He kept us from drowning. Then he got scared by the ship." "We didn't even thank him, Jack," said Annie. "We didn't say goodbye." Jack and Annie looked back at the water. "Hey, what's happening over there?" said Annie. She pointed to the rear of the ship. Sailors were facing the sea, yelling and shouting. "What are they yelling at?" Annie asked. Jack and Annie threw off their blankets and took off across the deck. They saw Joe and Tommy standing at the edge of the crowd. What are they doing?" Annie yelled. "What's going on?" They snarled it into the net," Tommy shouted. "We've caught the beast at last," shouted Joe. "Caught it?" Annie looked at Jack. "Come on," Jack cried. He and Annie pushed their way through the crowd. "Children, stop," the professor shouted, hurrying after them. "Don't get in the way." But Jack and Annie squeezed through the crowd of sailors and scientists until they got to the giant octopus was tangled in the net. His arms were charmed to the seaweed into the foam. His body had turned bright red and a cloud of dark ink billowed around him. "You're hurting him," Annie yelled. "Leave him alone." "Move away," yelled a sailor. Some of the sailors were yelling mean things at the octopus. Others were terrified. Even the captain was caught up in the panic. "Stand back," he shouted. "It could be powerful enough to sink the ship." "That's crazy," said Jack. "Leave him alone." "Its tentacles are as hard as steel," shouted one of the sailors. "No, they're not," cried Annie. "They're soft. They saved us from drowning." But everyone kept shouting, "Hungry for human flesh, devour a man in one bite, thirsty for blood." "He's not any of those things," yelled Annie. "Throw the harpoons," yelled a sailor. "Get your axes, swords, and knives," yelled another. "Ready the guns," the captain said. "No," screamed Annie. "No," roared Jack. The children are right," shouted the professor. He and Henry had squeezed through the crowd too. They were standing behind Jack and Annie. Jack felt relieved. "The professor says we're right," Annie yelled. "Do not destroy it, Captain," roared the professor. "Haul it on board." On board, said Jack. Captain, captured alive and whole, said the professor. His eyes gleamed. We can study it. No, let's him go, said Jack. Just let him swim away and be free. Please, screamed Annie. Let him go. But neither the professor nor the captain seemed to hear Jack and Annie. They were too busy arguing over what to do with the octopus. We must kill it, Professor, said the captain. It could grab the whole hull and drag the ship down to the bottom. But scientists, we need it alive, the professor, said the professor. At least till we have examined it. But now the octopus had gathered his long arms around himself and for protection. Annie burst into tears. Henry, help him, she sobbed. Don't kill him or capture him. Henry looked upset too. Excuse me, sir, he shouted. Excuse me, the girl is right. We should let him go. But no one listened to Henry either. Jack, cried Annie. She grabbed him. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Save him! We have to save him! What can we do? We've tried everything, said Jack. Then he remembered his own words. His own words helped him remember. And then he knew exactly what to do. Chapter 9. Think, where's my backpack? Jack yelled to Annie. What? Said Annie. My backpack, said Jack. Don't worry about it now, said Annie. We have to. The wand. Jack interrupted to her. Oh, said Annie, the wand. We have to find my pack fast, said Jack. Jack and Annie pushed past the sailors crowding the railing. They ran across the deck. Did you bring it in the rowboat? Annie yelled. Yes, no, I don't know, said Jack. I can't remember. Think, said Annie. Jack tried to think as they ran around the upper deck of the ship. Did I have it in the rowboat? What happened in the rowboat? I felt sick in the rowboat. I hugged my backpack in the rowboat. I remember, Jack shouted. I was holding onto my backpack on the boat. Then it's here somewhere, said Annie. Jack won the wardroom, said Jack. Hurry, cried Annie. Jack and Annie raced down 2 flights of steps. They looked in the wardroom. Jack's pack wasn't there. Henry's lab, said Annie. Yes, it was there, said Jack. I remember now. I left it on the table. I put it down when I looked through the microscope. Jack and Annie ran up the 2 flights of steps. Henry's lab. They tried to open the door, but it was locked. We need Henry, said Jack. We don't have time, said Annie. We don't have a choice, said Jack. Jack and Annie charged back up the stairs to the upper deck. The crew was still gathered at the end of the deck, yelling and shrieking at the octopus. Henry was coming toward them. Henry, help us, said Annie. She raced to Henry and grabbed him by the arm. She pulled him toward the staircase. You have to unlock your lab. We have to get Jack's pack. It's life or death. Hurry. Why, what? Sputtered Henry. We'll explain later, said Jack. Just hurry, said Annie. Henry looked baffled, but he walked quickly down and led Jack and Annie down the stairs. They nearly pushed him across the hall toward his lab. The scientist pulled out his key and unlocked the door. Jack and Annie burst into the lab. Yay, said Annie. Jack's backpack was lying on the table. Jack grabbed it and tore it open. He pulled out the wand of the amethyst. The silver spiral gleamed in the dim lit of the room. What is that? Asked Henry. We'll explain later, said Annie. Come on, let's go back up, said Jack. No, we don't have time, cried Annie. Use it now. Say something now before they hurt him. Jack held up the wand. 5 words, said Annie. I know, said Jack. But what 5 words? This was their only chance. Hurry, said Annie. I am, said Jack. But we can't just save him. This one time we have to make sure the ship never ever tries to hurt him or others like him again. Jack closed his eyes. He pictured the giant octopus, the umbrella-like body, and the 10 long tentacles, the gaze of the yellow eyes, a gaze that had curiosity and shyness. Jack thought of the sheer wonder of the octopus's extent. The giant sea animal was incredibly amazing. It was like a miracle. Jack wished he and Annie could explain the miracle of the octopus to everyone, but no one would listen to them unless... Hurry, Jack, say the words, said Annie. Make them hear the truth. The words burst out of Jack. What, said Annie? Make them hear the truth, said Jack, his eyes still shut tight. That's my wish. Make all the guys upstairs hear the truth about the octopus. What are you talking about, said Annie. What is that stick you're holding? Jack opened his eyes. He shook his head at Annie, but she didn't see him. It's a magic wand, Annie said to Henry. Actually, said Jack, trying to think of something else to explain. Oh, yes, I see, said Henry, smiling sadly. You're pretending like children. We are children, said Annie. Come on, Jack. Let's go tell them the truth. Chapter 10. The Heart of the Ocean. Jack put the wand back into his pack. Then he and Annie charged out of the lab with Henry behind them. The three of them climbed back up the stairs. When they stepped onto the top, they heard the sailors still shouting and yelling. Jack and Annie raced across the deck. They pushed through the crowd until they got to the railing. The octopus was still in the net, bright red and hiding its head in fear. And the sailors had gathered weapons. Some were aiming harpoons, and others stood by with knives and some pointed pistols. Stop, cried Annie. Stand back, the captain yelled at her. You must bring it up alive, begged the professor. I beg you to let me examine it before you slay it, Captain. But before the captain could answer, someone hurled a harpoon at the creature. It missed and landed in the water. No, yelled Annie. Listen to us, Jack yelled in his loudest voice. You have to hear the truth. He stood up on the bottom rung of the ship's railing so everyone could hear him. Don't touch him, he shouted. He's not going to hurt you. He deserves to live peacefully in the sea. He's a miracle of nature. But no one listened to Jack. No one even turned to look at him. Stop, hear us, said Annie. We speak the truth. Leave him alone. Remove the children, the captain roared again. Now! Tommy and Joe grabbed Jack and Annie. Let us go! We have to talk to them, yelled Annie, kicking and flailing. Jack and Annie broke loose from the sailors. She's right. They have to hear the truth, Jack yelled, running toward the railing. He's okay where he is. He's different from people, but he's a miracle. Again, no one seemed to hear them. The magic's not working, Annie cried to Jack. I know, said Jack. He was desperate. No one was hearing the truth. What's wrong? He and Annie had followed all the rules. They had tried their hardest. They were trying to help others, not themselves. They had tried their hardest, and Jack had only used 5 words. Look, one of the sailors shrieked. Look at the monster! Jack and Annie looked back at the water. The giant octopus had uncovered his head and raised it out of the water. The sound of the breath was breathy and whispery, as if it came from the wind. The members of the crew lowered their weapons and stepped back in awe. It speaks, shouted the sailor. Me. The sound was wild and shrilled, as if it came from the deep forest. Go! The sound was hollow and haunted, as if it came from the ancient gong or bell or drum. Home! The sound was unbearable, sad, as if it came from the heart of the ocean. I'm no monster. The octopus fell back into the water. All the seamen and scientists stared in wonder and terror. Annie's voice rang through the silence. Did you hear him? He said. Let me go home. I'm no monster. The crew looked at each other in shock. That's what he said. I heard it, said one man. I heard it with my own ears. I heard it too, said another. Me too. "It's a sign," said the sailor. "We can't hurt him, or any other like him," said another. All eyes turned to the captain. He stood still for a moment, staring at the giant octopus in the net. The captain looked at the professor. The professor seemed stunned. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The captain looked at Jack Nanny. "Please hear him," said Danny. "He told you the truth." The captain stared at the octopus for a long moment. Then he raised his hand. "Free him," he said softly. The sailors slowly put their harpoons, axes, pistols, and ropes down. "Sir, I request permission to cut the creature from the net," Henry said to the captain. The captain nodded. "Permission granted, Mr. Mosley," said the captain. "Help me," Henry said to Jack Nanny. "Sure," said Jack. "We'll come too, mate," said Joe. Joe and Tommy hurried after Henry, Jack Nanny into a row of a small boat on the deck. The sailors lowered it into the water, down to the surface of the water. Then Jack, Annie, Joe, Tommy, and Henry all climbed down the ladder and stepped inside. Everyone else watched from the deck. Joe and Tommy rowed along the side of the ship until they came to the spot where the giant octopus was trapped. The two sailors held the boat steady with their oars. "Grab the net," Henry said to Jack Nanny. Jack Nanny reached out and grabbed the corner of the net. Annie helped him pull it out of the water. Henry used a big knife to slice through the thick rope strands. Even though the rowboat rocked violently, Jack didn't feel sick at all. Jack, Annie, and Henry pulled the torn net into the small rowboat. Jack kept staring at the octopus. He looked back at all of them with his great eyes and tentacles spread about him like a giant flower. His fierce red color had changed back to gray. "Goodbye, you," Annie said softly. "Go home now." The octopus lifted two tentacles as if waving goodbye. Then he slipped under the surface of the water and vanished. Chapter 11. Goodbye, mates. Jack looked up. The captain, the professor, and all the crew members were all gazing silently down at the water. Henry gave the captain a salute. The captain saluted back. Then everyone on board clapped and shouted. Overhead, the clouds had disappeared as if a curtain had been pulled away from the sky. Pink and red swirls of light streaked the blue. The cheering died down. "Let us disturb these waters no more," commanded the captain. Unfurl the sails, get the sea up in the boilers." Henry turned to Jack Nanny. "While they prepare the ship, shall we return you to the shore?" he asked. "Yes, please," said Annie. Jack just nodded. He was totally exhausted. As Joe and Tommy started rowing back toward the land, the wind shifted and died down to a light breeze. "I predict a fine clear night tonight," said Tommy. "And tomorrow too," said Joe. "And the wind should be brisk." A good time to sail," said Tommy. When they drew close to shore, Tommy and Joe both jumped out of the boat, splashed through the shallow water, and they pulled the boat up and onto the beach. Jack Nanny hopped out. Henry climbed out after them. "Thanks," Jack said to the sailor. Henry walked Annie and Jack up to the dunes. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" he asked. "What will you do when night comes?" "Don't worry," said Annie. "We'll get back to our parents before dark." "Lucky you," said Henry wistfully. "I wish I could be back home having a voyage." "I hope you keep having a good voyage. I wish I could be back in my own family before dark." "I hope you keep having a good voyage," said Annie. "And I hope you learn a lot," said Jack. "Bye." "Wait, before you go," said Henry, "I want to give you something." Henry reached into the pocket of his vest and took out a beautiful nautilus shell. "The real reason I ran into my lab when the storm came was to get this," he said. "I didn't want to risk losing it. but now I would like to give it to you. Oh no, Henry, you love it. You keep it, said Annie. I do love it, said Henry, but I want you to have it. Today you taught all of us an important lesson. It is a dark day in the deep sea when the cause-sensed creatures are to suffer. The professor said we can conquer our fears through knowledge, but you taught us that our fears can best be conquered through past compassion. Even we scientists must never forget to have compassion for all living creatures. My compassion for a little creature that once lived in this shell made me very happy. Oh man, thought Jack. That's the secret. Henry held out the gleaming Nautilus shell. Annie took it from him. Thanks, Henry, she said. We promise we'll take very good care of it. Thank you, said Henry. He brushed his hand across his eyes. Well, I must say goodbye now. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. Henry saluted them. Before Jack and Annie could say anything, the scientist turned and walked briskly back to the rowboat. Let's go, Annie said to Jack. Jack and Annie walked around the dunes and headed through the sea grass to the rope ladder. Then they climbed back into the treehouse and looked out the window. The rowboat was gliding over the shimmering water of the sunlit sea, heading back to the HMS Challenger. Goodbye, mates, said Jack. Our mission, said Annie, as if she just remembered. She looked at Jack. We didn't discover a secret of happiness. Yes, we did, said Jack with a smile. Henry just gave us a secret of greatness, of happiness. It is having compassion for all living creatures. Compassion, said Annie. Yeah, that means you're feeling sympathy and love for them, said Jack. Oh, sure, Annie said matter-of-factly. Loving other creatures makes me really happy. I wonder why some people don't get that. I don't know, said Jack. Too bad they have to see a miracle like an octopus talking, said Annie. I know what you mean, said Jack. The octopus just being an octopus is the real miracle. Annie smiled, and Henry shelled the little creature inside him too, said Jack. She said. He was a miracle too. She held up the shining shell. Jack took the shell from her and carefully put it into his backpack. The shell will help us remember the secret of, he said. I think we always knew it, said Annie. Henry just put it into words for us. Come on, let's go. Annie picked up the Pennsylvania book and turned to the picture of the Frog Creek Woods. Let me go home, she repeated the strange sounds from the octopus. Jack smiled and started to tell her to say it the right way, but before he could, the treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, then everything was still, absolutely still. Soft raindrops pattered against the roof of the treehouse. I love being home, said Annie. Me too, said Jack with a sigh. Jack and Annie strapped on their bike helmets and pulled on their sneakers. Then Jack and Annie took the research book out of his pack and put it in their library books. All I want to do is go home to our warm, dry house and see Mom and Dad, said Annie. Me too, said Jack. Annie read one of my new library books. Annie, dinner, said Annie. And a good dinner, said Jack. No stale biscuits, lime juice. He slipped on his pack. And no pea soup. Pea soup, asked Annie, but Jack was already starting down the rope ladder. And then read a little more and climb into bed, he continued. A warm, dry bed in a warm, dry house, said Annie, following him. Yep, said Jack, stepping onto the wet grass. I guess the octopus just wanted to go home. Hey, I wonder if he has a name. Said Annie. She and Jack climbed on their bikes. I think his name might be Charles. That sounds right, said Jack, laughing. I wonder if Charles the octopus wife and octopus kids. I bet he does, said Annie. And I bet he couldn't wait to get home and hold them in all 8 of his arms. Jack laughed. Yeah, I bet you're right, he said. Then he and Annie took off riding through the Frog Creek woods. The rain fell harder, but it didn't matter. They were heading home.